Пані та панове, добрий вечір. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Danil Lubkivsky, and I'm glad to welcome you on behalf of the Kyiv Security Forum. Today we have very special guests for a military panel. I wish to introduce, first of all, a hero who represents here the brave men and women besieged in the Azovstal steelworks plant, one of the most tragic symbols of Russia's war against Ukraine. Святослав Паламар Калина, Deputy Commander of the Azov Regiment. I thank you, Святославе. Дякую, Святославе, за те, що ви сьогодні з нами. General Philip Breedlove.
Дякую вам за те, що запросили.
General Philip Breedlove, United States Air Force European Command and former Supreme Allied Commander Europe of NATO. Thank you, sir, for being with us. General Wesley Clark, United States Army 4-star General and former Supreme Allied Commander Europe of NATO. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Melinda Haring, Deputy Director of the Eurasia Center of the Atlantic Council, our good friend and good friend of Ukraine. Thank you, Melinda, for being with us. And Arseniy Yatsenyuk, Prime Minister of Ukraine in 2014 and 16 and Chairman of the Kyiv Security Forum. It's the 79th day of Russia's genocidal war against Ukraine. Russia does not get what it wants. Their powerless rage grows. The American intelligence describes the state of the conflict as a war of attrition. One of our biggest pains is the fate of the Ukrainian men and women in uniform and the civilians in Azovstal. This morning, the Russian invaders once again tried to break through into the plant. Russia continues shellings and bombardments. What kind of international pressure must be mobilized to save our heroes in Mariupol? That's what we are going to discuss today, as well as the situation on the front and the perspectives and the future scenarios. I invite Major Sviatoslav Kalina Palamar to address Ukraine and our international audience. Святославе, для нас велика честь, що ви сьогодні з нами. Ми просимо від імені Київського безпекового форуму передати слова найвищої солідарності і вдячності всім, хто є поруч з вами. І перемоги. Запрошую вас до слова, запрошую вас звернутися до української і міжнародної аудиторії. Ваше слово.
Дуже дякую. Я дуже дякую всім. Я маю велику честь сьогодні представити найкращих бійців на цьому світі. Це українських солдатів, українських сержантів та офіцерів. І я в першу чергу хочу подякувати за народу Сполучених Штатів Америки. Я хочу подякувати військово-політичному керівництві цієї великої держави за підтримку, яку вони надають Україні та українській армії в цілому. Якщо коротко розказати про ситуацію, яка зараз відбувається, про те, з якою силою противника ми стикнулися, це 24 лютого ворог в лиці Російської Федерації напав на територію України. За цей період ми боролися з ворогом, кількісно та якісно він нас переважав в кількості озброєння, в кількості піхоти, в кількості людей. Це угрупування нараховувало близько 14 тисяч військовослужбовців. Це надзвичайна величезна кількість техніки, це літаки, це кораблі, це корабельна артилерія, це літаковиліти як тактичної, так і стратегічної авіації, і велика кількість артилерії, засобів РСЗО, а також величезна кількість ракет була випущена по нас за весь цей період. Нашим гарнізоном вдалося знищити близько 6 тисяч одиниць ворожої сили, в тому числі одного генерала. Це близько 78 танків, це більше 100 одиниць бронетехніки, це за підтвердженими. Так, є ще, звісно, багато непідтверджених непідтверджених даних, на які ми не будемо спиратися. Хто проти нас воює та воював? Це 150-та дивізія, це 68-й танковий полк, це 83-я бригада ВДВ, це 346-та бригада ГРУ спецназ, це 22-га бригада спецназ ГРУ, це 9-й полк морської піхоти ДНР, це 810-та бригада Чорноморського флоту, це 155-та Тихоокеанська бригада, і також це стратегічна авіація та тактична авіація. Це найманці Вагнера і також інші бойовики з інших територій Російської Федерації та Кавказу. На що я би також хотів наголосити на площадці, нам насправді дуже не вистачає, борючись з такою переважаючою кількістю ворога, нам насправді весь цей час не вистачало ні засобів протиповітряної оборони, які би нам дали змогу підбивати літаки. Нам не вистачало весь цей час та до сих пір не вистачає засобів протикорабельних засобів, які ми мали би змогу підбити кораблі. Але все ж таки наші хлопці, наші дівчата весь цей час вистояли, і ми далі продовжуємо чинити опір. Так сталося, що в дійсності кільце навколо нас звужувалося, і з 1 березня ми вже були повністю оточені та заблоковані. І відповідно з боями ми відступали, і з березня місяця ми вже починаємо воювати на території лише заводу Азов, в кінці березня на території заводу Азовсталь. Ситуація важка, ворог цинічний, ворог не дотримується жодних міжнародних конвенцій, він не дотримується Женевських конвенцій. Знаючи, що зараз на території Азовсталі перебуває величезна кількість, а це близько 600 поранених бійців. Це близько 600 поранених бійців. Він далі продовжує скидати бомби на військовий шпиталь. Тим самим, як завжди, порушує всі міжнародні норми. Ворог, окрім цього, працює також в плані пропаганди. Наш підрозділ, полк Азов безпосередньо, хочу наголосити, що це не бойовики. Це військовослужбовці України, це громадяни України різних національностей. Це і євреї, це і українці, це і греки, це і білоруси, це і гагауси, і це все громадяни України. У нас немає найманців, ми не бойовики, ми різного віросповідання і в першу чергу ми українські солдати. Тому оце вся пропаганда спрямована саме проти нас. Всі ці роки підливала масло в вогонь для їхньої пропаганди. Щодо того, що буде далі. Ми чинитимемо опір далі, доки у нас буде змога. У нас в дійсності є проблеми з БК, у нас є проблеми з харчуванням, у нас є проблеми з водою, з медикаментами, але ми продовжуємо чинити опір та ми виконуємо наказ нашого вищого політичного командування – тримати оборону. Оборону ми тримаємо і, незважаючи ні на що, продовжуємо далі битися. Сьогодні ворог за підтримки авіації, за підтримки артилерії продовжує наступати, продовжує штурмувати наші позиції, та ми продовжуємо їх відбивати. Маючи таку нагоду, я би хотів звернутися до всіх представників цієї конференції та сказати про те, що ми ще раз подякувати та сказати про те, що, можливо, такий великий народ та такі великі представники такої великої нації, як Сполучені Штати Америки, я би дуже хотів, щоб посприяли в тому, щоб в першу чергу помогли евакуювати наших поранених бійців. І якщо буде на це можливість, підключити всі зусилля для того, щоб допомогти в процесі екстракшн нашого гарнізону. Це хлопці і дівчата, які в оточенні зробили все можливе для того, щоб перемолоти, перепустити через себе таке величезне угрупування. І повірте мені, якщо б ми цього не зробили, то вся ця орда пішла б далі. Вона би захопила інші території України, вона би пішла вглиб України, і лінія фронту зараз би виглядала зовсім по-інакшому. І хочу наголосити на цьому, що наш ворог не дотримується жодних цінностей. В нього зовсім інший світогляд. Це варварський світогляд, який має на меті лише одне – знищити весь цивілізований світ. Захищаючи Азовсталь, захищаючи Маріуполь, ми захищаємо не тільки Україну, ми захищаємо всі цінності цього цивілізованого світу і всі цінності, які з такою боротьбою нам вдалося відстояти та перемогти нацизм, перемогти комунізм. Та я дуже дякую ще раз за те, що Сполучені Штати Америки як в першій, так в другій, так і в сьогоднішній агресії Росії проти України надають допомогу нашій державі.
Дорогі Святославе, ще раз я хочу подякувати від нас усіх. Вам сил, вам стійкості і нам всім спільної перемоги. Ми віримо в цю перемогу, і ця перемога буде обов'язково. Ми дуже вам дякуємо за можливість і час звернутися до нашої великої аудиторії. Дякуємо вам.
Дякую вам. Дякую вам.
Дуже дякую.
It's a unique moment, I feel. Yesterday, the Ukrainian delegation raised the issue of our brave men and women besieged in Azovstal at the United Nations Security Council. We call upon the international community to help Ukraine rescue our people. The Azov regiment has also called on the United Nations and the Red Cross to evacuate what Sviatoslav said, the wounded, who are being treated in makeshift hospitals at the industrial site. I invite Arseniy Yatsenyuk to make his introduction.
Well, that's really impressive. That's unbelievable and impressive how courageous these Ukrainian men and women in the uniform are. And my appeal to the world, my appeal to the free world, to the global community, to all governments and Ukrainian government, we need to do everything. We need to do our utmost in order to rescue these Ukrainian heroes. This is the real example of one of the strongest fighters in the global history. We need to save these people. They deserve to live and to fight. They deserve to see their families. And they deserve to be honored as real heroes, fighting for Ukraine and fighting for the free world. As of now, we are living in a completely different world. The world before and after 24th of February. And my take is that there is no longer any kind of global order. Autocracy and dictators are fighting against democracies and the free world. Putin's invasion actually started the process of defragmentation of the global order after the Second World War. We need to build a new one. And this is the chance for us. And this chance heavily dependent on whether Ukraine will win this fight. We must win this war, and we will win this war. What is needed? Of vital importance for us in terms of military support, there are two most important issues. The first one is to arm Ukraine, to deliver weaponry, heavy weaponry for the Ukrainian military on a fast track, on a most speedy way which is possible right now. I do commend Biden administration and bipartisan support in the United States. After the US actually enacted a land-lease deal and decided to contribute around $40 billion in order to fight against Nazi-style aggressor who is Putin. So the second one is that we need to provide security guarantees for Ukraine. After Ukraine reclaims and retakes its territory, it is of crucial importance for us to have real security guarantees, not that one that resemble Budapest Memorandum. The only solution I see on the table is the Ukraine is a member of NATO. Sweden and Finland already decided to join NATO. Ukraine has to be in this group. This is the decision in the interest of NATO to make Ukraine a NATO member as quick as possible. Ukrainian military is already compatible with NATO standards. So due to the war, Ukrainian men and women in the uniform showed their strong resolve and showed that they are the same as NATO military and NATO army. So on the global agenda, we need to have a very strong and bold decision. First, to arm Ukraine. Second, to make Ukraine a NATO member. We will prevail in this war. I strongly believe. So God save Ukraine and God save the free world.
Thank you, Mr. Yatsenyuk. And now I will turn to our guests, to our speakers, and I'm really pleased that we have you today with us. My first question goes to General Clark. Sir, I'm proud to see you. We know that you are a true and reliable friend of Ukraine, and we do appreciate all your support of our nation. Mariupol and Azovstal, the Ukrainian fighters in the besieged city, in the besieged steel plant, they voted not to give up. This is an enormous human tragedy, wartime tragedy. In your opinion, how should the international community react and act in order to rescue these people? You're welcome.
Thank you. First, I'd like to express my appreciation to the Atlantic Council, Melinda, and the Ukraine Security Forum for having this, and for you hosting it. I'd like to express my agreement with the former Prime Minister Yatsenyuk. I agree we need to arm Ukraine and we need to bring Ukraine into NATO. That's the only conceivable solution. And that can't be done until Russia's ejected. Russia needs to be ejected by the force of Ukrainian arms, and there shouldn't be a ceasefire until that time. It's that simple. Now, as for those brave men who are fighting in Mariupol, I have tremendous admiration for their courage, for their sacrifice, for the resolute leadership. These men are standing and fighting, and they're fighting for the entire free world, as well as the United States and Ukraine, and we realize what that commitment means. What can be done? I think that in the military sense, we're not going to see an American direct assault on the Russian forces. It's not going to happen. So what should happen is an emergency package of military assistance to Ukraine that would enable Ukraine to conduct that assault. What I'd like to see is fighter aircraft and ground attack aircraft moved in quickly. I'd like to see long-range U.S. multiple launch rocket systems. And I'd like to see specific intelligence given in a humanitarian sense to be able to take out the Russian forces that are surrounding Mariupol. And I think this has to be an exception to the guidance that President Biden recently gave to the intelligence community. I think there's an exceptional humanitarian tragedy unfolding in Mariupol. I think the United States should give all indirect possible assistance as rapidly as possible to resolve this. Moreover, I think we have to go to the international community through the United Nations and ask the United Nations to declare an immediate ceasefire in Mariupol so these men can come out. Russia should agree to this. Russia's losing forces every day. Hundreds of men trying to take this steel plant. What's the point of it? All they have to do is declare a ceasefire. Of course, it would have to be internationally assured. We can't have the Ukrainian soldiers leaving and then being shot up as happened in 2014 after the declaration of Mr. Putin that they would be safe leaving. We've got to have international assurances for this. But why wouldn't Russia want to just go ahead and release these people? Doesn't make sense to me, but maybe they think that they have to show that they're going to conquer. but they won't. I think these incredible fighters in Mariupol are there for the long haul. How long it is, how tragic it becomes, well, I think the United States has the military means to get to Ukraine to provide for their immediate relief, and an armored column with support that could smash through there and disrupt it. I hope the United States would take this under consideration as an urgent security matter.
I thank you, sir. Let's discuss a bigger picture. Recently, you said that if by the summer the Ukrainians have not received sufficient supplies from the United States, such as high mobility artillery, rocket system, and so on, they are going to be outmaneuvered by the Russian forces. There is no long war strategy possible for Ukraine, you said. Sir, what do you think now? How do you assess the overall development of the military situation on the front? And is it already a war of attrition? What is needed, in your opinion, for Ukraine to make a turning point in this war? You're welcome.
Well, I'll answer, but I also want my friend and colleague, General Breedlove, to come in on this because he has views also on this that are very important. But I think that to call for a long war is to bleed Ukraine unnecessarily due to fear of Russian escalation. I think that's what it comes down to, just pure and simple. And I think that it's not right, it's not fair, it's not wise, it's bad strategy. For all the reasons that I said, we don't want a long war, not least because of what it does to Ukraine, but also because it raises the long-term risks. It brings China in, and it allows Russia to mobilize. It puts more stress on the alliance. It's just not the right strategy. So what has to be done is break the stalemate. Stalemate can be broken two ways. It could be broken if Ukraine has the combat power to immediately push back the Russians in Donbass, slice in through Kherson, close off Russian access to Ukraine from Ukrainian Crimea, go in both directions on the south coast, clean them out. That could be done. It could also be done if Ukraine fights a mobile defense. Let them come into Donbass and then close it off. Both require tanks, self-propelled artillery, attack helicopters, air-to-ground assets like Sukhois or F-16s or A-10s, and then you've got to have the intelligence and the logistics to support this. Now, I understand that most of the artillery pieces are in that were announced. Don't know where they are, don't know how well they're doing, but they're not self-propelled artillery. Look, if we really believe in a long war strategy, we got to train the trainers out immediately. M1 tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, M109A6 self-propelled howitzers, Apache helicopters, F-16, A-10 aircraft. Don't wait, because it's not that the Ukrainian forces can't learn this quickly, but to get the logistics behind it so it's sustainable. That's a 3-month, 4-month, all hands on deck effort to do that. That has to be started now. So you can't wait until, we're scrounging for Warsaw Pact equipment right now. We're going out and begging people, well, don't you have some old T-55 tanks? Can't you send me some of these obsolete, unmodernized MiGs? What about the old Sukhois? I mean, all over the world. And the Russians are trying to outmaneuver us and buy these assets before we can get them to Ukraine. That's not going to work, not in the long term. That's a stopgap measure. In the immediate future, within the 6-month window, Ukraine needs to be transitioning to NATO standard equipment. Started with the 155s, now move on to the rest of it. So I think that if Ukraine gets the HIMARS, tracked MLRS, if we get all of the T-72 tanks that are available right now from our allies, if we put in and there are Hind attack helicopters, Mi-35s that are available worldwide on the market, bring those in, and with help from friends, we can avert the long war scenario. Ukraine right now is making incredible progress northeast of Kyiv. That's the soft mid-belly of Russia. They have no idea what would happen. And this idea that somehow Russia should be a sanctuary, that they should be protected behind their border, and they are free to assault and attack and fire artillery and use air defense against Ukraine, it's nonsense. So just as Ukraine's president is standing up and saying to the president of France, no, we will not agree to give up terrain, to give Mr. Putin an off-ramp. No, we won't agree to it. Also, you cannot agree that Russia is a sanctuary. It cannot be a sanctuary. They are the aggressor. They started this, and this war has to be concluded on satisfactory terms to prove to the world in this new world order that the former prime minister is talking about that aggression doesn't pay.
Thank you, sir, for these remarks. They sound like a plan. Thank you for this, for your opinion. But we talk about not only Ukraine's victory, but Russia's defeat. Russia's defeat scares a lot of politicians of what I'm afraid of in the West. And here we have a special topic, just to have a final question to you. What do you think, why should the West stop be afraid of Putin's threats of nuclear weapons, and how can we stop Putin from threatening the West with nuclear arms? You're welcome. Sir?
You're asking me or
right. This is my final question to you. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, look. First of all, Russia, and before it the Soviet Union, has spent 60 years cultivating in the West fear of nuclear weapons. This started in London with the Committee on Nuclear Disarmament. It started back full force again during the theater nuclear modernization debates in the 1980s. At one point, the Soviet ambassador to the Netherlands even gave awards to the Dutch peace groups who were protesting nuclear rearmament for the West. So there's a long history that Putin is relying on to frighten the West. I think what Western leaders have to understand is that Mr. Putin is going to use these nuclear weapons whenever it suits him, whenever he thinks it's to his advantage. He gets two advantages of nuclear weapons. Number one, you kill people on the battlefield, okay? But you're killing them right now with artillery. Number two, you shock, scare, terrify the West that this is the Third World War. Well, firing a couple of nuclear artillery rounds on the battlefield is a very bad thing, but it's not the Third World War. If he does it, you've got to convince Mr. Putin that that's when NATO will come in with conventional forces and stop this immediately. Not nuclear, conventional. And believe me, we have the capacity to do that. We could come right in, working through from the south to the north, and just roll that up with air power, with combined arms movements, with much better intelligence and coordination with the Ukrainian forces, and it could be done. So I think that the statesmen in the West have to stop peddling Russian propaganda and disinformation and fear. And they have to recognize what the stakes are here. Ukraine must succeed. Russia must fail. Putin must fail. It must be said again and again and again. Putin must fail. Putin is a criminal. He started an aggressive war. The fact that people have known him for 20 years, the fact that he has nuclear weapons, it doesn't matter. He's a criminal. He needs to, President Biden said he doesn't see how he can, okay, we're not into regime change, but we certainly don't owe him an off-ramp. We need to stop thinking in those terms. It represents to Russia Western weakness, and it will be exploited. It gives him the incentive to continue to stay in the fight.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your support, for your great remarks, and for your participation. And now I turn to General Breedlove. Thank you, sir, for your time, and I'm really happy that you are with us today, that you listened to what the senior representative of the Azov regiment said and what we talk about. In your opinion, how do you assess the actions, the strategy and tactics of the Ukrainian armed forces, the progress they did? And in your opinion, what is needed for a military breakthrough? You're welcome, sir.
So first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be on this panel. I know everyone here and I respect them deeply, and it's good to see Minister Yatsenyuk again. And Wes and Melinda and I do a lot of things together, so it's good to be back with the team. So the first thing I would say is what I sort of said to the Major before we started, how proud I am of him and how proud I am of what his forces specifically are doing. But now let's talk to a bigger picture. I think the whole world has seen what the Ukrainian military and Ukrainian soldiers are capable of. And while the whole world was admiring the problem that Russia was piling up on the borders, what the whole world didn't see was how Ukraine was doing just a terrific job of preparing, of planning, and using a smaller, less technically capable force to deliver a sound defeat, a strategic defeat to our world superpower who had crossed the borders into their country. So I think that we need to recognize and applaud the efforts of all of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines of Ukraine. What is needed now is really two things. One is an internal thing to Ukraine, and the other is an external thing to the world. Let me cover that one first. I remember the most senior people in my country saying, we are going to give Ukraine everything they need, or we are giving Ukraine everything they need. I want to applaud my country for doing a good job, but we have not done the whole job. We have not given Ukraine everything they need. We need first and immediately to get to them things Wes has already mentioned, the MLRS in multiple different forms and multiple different types of artillery rounds. We need medium and high altitude air defense. We had just a small amount arrive in the terms of what is needed by Ukraine. And I'm using this personal pronoun to great effect. We in the West, we in the United States, we need to be supplying medium and high altitude air defense. And while Ukraine is doing some wonderful things with their Neptune coastal defense cruise missiles, a more sophisticated set of gear would really help them in some of these battles that are ongoing. And frankly, no matter what's happening on the ground, Russia now is exhibiting sea control in the northern Black Sea. And that should not stand. The West should not let that stand. And part of that is giving Ukraine the coastal defense capability that it needs to do that. I have heard both the former minister and Wes Clark speak about time. My first remark was going to be time is critical. We need to do this now. We need to be jumping on this Russian force now. And part of now is getting the right equipment to the right place at the right time. I literally yesterday for the first time read that some of our artillery had finally made it to the front and some of our artillery had finally made it to Odessa. This is not a problem of the Ukrainian military. They're fighting a war for the world against a world superpower. This is our responsibility. We in the West should be taking responsibility for moving the right equipment to the right place at the right time when they need it. about 7 days ago, it looked to us like two of the fighting forces in the Far East, Ukrainian fighting forces, had to slow down their shooting and at one point actually stopped, probably because they were running so low on artillery rounds. That's our fault. That's our problem, and we need to fix it for Ukraine. And so we've got to get on this. And finally, all of this business about giving Mr. Putin an off-ramp and not doing some things for fear of provoking him is, as I think Wes Clark said magnificently, this is a bunch of hooey. We need to get focused on winning and giving Ukraine everything they win. And right now, Melinda's way smarter on this than me, but we've got some policy issues in Washington, D.C. that we need to get our leadership over so that we can make those things happen.
Thank you, sir, for this opinion. Actually, I wonder if we are grateful to the United States administration, to both parties, to the United States Congress, for an enormous and unprecedented support of Ukraine. And definitely we need more. You say that it's our fault, but please explain to the Ukrainian audience that, I mean, definitely our fault in your sense, but please explain to the Ukrainian audience, in your opinion, what is the reason behind that, as you put it, fault? Why it is going so slow sometimes at some points? You're welcome.
So I actually believe, and this is just my opinion, and there are many that don't agree with me, although I think General Clark fully agrees with me, as does Melinda. We celebrate in the West when we get equipment to the borders of Ukraine. I firmly believe that that is the wrong time to celebrate. This is not the measure of merit when we deliver things to Poland and Romania. The measure of merit is when is this equipment in the hand of Ukrainian soldiers on the battlefield so that they can take the fight to the enemy. And so I firmly believe and have advocated for, we in the West need to be a bigger part of delivering this equipment further into Ukraine in order to take this burden off of the Ukraine military so that they can focus on fighting a world superpower that has invaded their country. And so I believe that we in the West, if we can't do it with boots on the ground, then we need to be hiring some very big contractors who have done this before for us in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan to get in there and help Ukraine get this stuff to where it's needed. The sad news is if we deliver it into Poland and 10 days later, battalions in the fight are having to slow down their shooting because they don't have artillery rounds, that is a failure on our part, on the Western part. We need to do a better job of facilitating Ukraine's ability to fight this war.
I liked your quote that I saw. I like your words you said recently that why don't we put NATO troops into Western Ukraine to carry out humanitarian missions and to set up a forward arms supply base? I fully agree, sir. Despite the fact that politically it looks very difficult, and those who take the decision, they take into account all the nuances that are important for the security interests for the Western Ukraine as well. But here, let me turn to another side. Let's look at Russia. And that would be interesting for you, for our audience, to listen to you as an expert, as a general, as a person who perfectly understands the logics of how the military acts. What do you think about the Russian potential, Russian morale, Russian capability to continue the war with Ukraine? Because what we see that Putin has already failed. Am I wrong? Please, you're welcome.
Clearly in the north, clearly strategically in the Kyiv campaign, Mr. Putin failed. He and his generals failed. And in my opinion, they showed up for a war that they weren't prepared for. They expected one thing and they got something very different. And this is just one more time to talk about how magnificently Ukraine's military prepared for this war and how badly Russia understood what was going on in Ukraine. And so I think that all of us who have led large forces understand if you start a war from an incorrect or a bad position, it is awfully hard to correct that during the course of the war. And so now Mr. Putin is suffering from a very bad plan and a very bad start because of his poor decisions and those who are advising him. And so the entire force of Russia has suffered from this. Clearly, this was a proud force at some point. And now they have had their army bloodied and routed in the north, and they're not doing all that well in the east either. And I think this is taking a big toll on the morale all the way down to the unit level. And may I just say one more thing?
Welcome.
I'm so proud of Western forces in general, and I'm proud of what I know about the Ukrainian forces as well. And that is that we put so much confidence and training in our young officers and our non-commissioned officers that we have this amazing battlefield resiliency and battlefield management of things like esprit de corps, right down to food. You know, we do this really well. And I think what we're seeing is the Russians do not do this very well. And so our forces, while your forces may be smaller in some cases than those they're facing across the battlefield, they are being well led and they are being well taken care of by their young leaders. And that is a hallmark of a Western army, in my opinion. At our unit levels, it's the senior NCOs, it's the young lieutenants, it's the captains in some cases that are making these things happen on the battlefield. And Ukraine can be very proud of the leadership that its forces has. Russia suffers from a lack of the same thing.
Great point. Great words. Sir, I would like to thank you very much for your participation, for your remarks, and for being with us, and for your support of Ukraine. And now I turn to our dear Melinda to sum up what we discussed, to tell your perspective, to tell your vision of the picture on the ground, and what is needed for Ukraine, and what the message can you bring about to the United States administration and to the community of experts in DC and around. You're welcome.
Thank you, Danila. Thank you, Prime Minister Yatsenyuk. It's great to be here with you. It's always great to be with my two favorite generals. Thank you for the opportunity, and it was wonderful to hear directly from Mariupol. So I want to say a few things that I think are obvious if you're sitting in Kiev, but that are not obvious if you're sitting in Washington, where I am. The first proposition is this: Ukraine is going to win, and we have to start acting like that. Proposition 2, Ukraine is going to have a renaissance after it wins the war. Ukraine is going to have a massive political and economic transition after it wins the war. The bottom line in Washington is we are still deluding ourselves and talking about escalation. We need to stop pretending that Russia can massively escalate. General Breedlove put it very, very well. They're demoralized, and now is the time to act. We need to make sure that the Ukrainians do not run out of ammunition, especially during the month of May. I think from Washington too, Danila, it's really hard to imagine how much damage has been inflicted in the last 70 plus days. We can't even really grasp that 20% of the population of Ukraine, a country between 41 and 44 million, has been displaced. There are hardly no children left in Ukraine. Kiev School of Economics estimates the damage of infrastructure at $94 billion. I think that's a low number. It's just impossible to understand how much damage has been done so quickly. In Mariupol, the city that we've been concentrating on today, the damage is horrific. Again, can't understand it, and we can't get there to document what happened. More journalists are starting to use satellite imagery, and Radio Svoboda, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty has been able to use satellite images, and they found 3 mass graves. Now, my friends, if you don't want more buchas, if you don't want to see those images on your screen anymore, now is the time to act. The satellite images that they found of the mass graves are enormous. They are much, much bigger than what was found in Bucha. We don't know how many bodies are there because journalists can't get there yet. But the bottom line is that time is of the essence right now. Danila, I'm a practical person, so I'm just going to jump to the what can we do. We have a big problem in Washington. So our government has changed, and General Breedlove and General Clark have done a wonderful job pushing them in the right direction. But there's a bill before Congress right now to send Ukraine additional money. And that bill is blocked because of a dunderhead, because of Senator Rand Paul, and he's blocked this. And we need the Ukrainian community, we need Americans of goodwill to get on the phone and flood the White House with phone calls and flood Senator Paul's office with phone calls and tell him to remove his hold and get this legislation passed as soon as possible. I'm going to say it again, and General Breedlove's going to say it again. Time is of the essence. Ukraine is running out of ammunition. They need ammunition as soon as possible. Even if this bill passes today, which it won't, it still takes time to move the kind of equipment that Ukraine needs. So let's make hell, let's make noise, and let's get this bill passed. Number 2, I want the journalistic community to document Russia's filtration camps. There's a lot of rumors, and it hasn't been documented now. It's very, very hard to get to that part, to Mariupol. We know that. But we need to do everything we can. Satellite imagery, let's be creative. Let's find a way to document this because right now, everyone's talking about the allegation of filtration camps. We know it's happening, and we need numbers. And we need to hold these people, we need to hold the Russian side to justice. Number 3, we and General Breedlove and I keep using we about the Americans. We, the Americans, need to stop patting ourselves on the back for how generous we've been with assistance. It's wonderful that we've opened our purses and wallets, the Western world has, but we need to make sure that the assistance is getting to the right people, and it's not. So bureaucracy is not our friend here or ever. The big international organizations don't know what they're doing, and a lot of them are not getting assistance to the most needy people. So as needs increase, assistance is going down, and we need to put pressure on international organizations to work with trusted Ukrainian partners who know how to move assistance from Poland across the country. There are great Ukrainian organizations that are honest and can make this happen. Do not reinvent the wheel. Do not build new logistical systems. They exist. Stop being lazy and call me, and I will tell you how to do it. Number 4, this is for Americans. Now's the time. I'm sure that you have an extra guest room in your home. Bring a Ukrainian family in. We need more houses now. Number 5, this is, as humans, we need to keep telling the stories, tell about the heroism of Mariupol. We need to talk about how life in Bucha is beginning again. It's so exciting. They had their first wedding. The market is reopening. This is the resilience of the Ukrainian people is endlessly inspiring. And I would ask Americans of all goodwill to host fundraisers and send money to trusted organizations that can get money to Ukraine. I personally give to RAZOM, R-A-Z-O-M. It's in New York. You can have a tax deduction. I trust them, and they are getting the job done. Finally, Danila, well done in organizing this today. And I just want to read a message from the Atlantic Council. Today, this week, we had a big dinner, and we honored the people of Ukraine. And President Zelensky, we were honored to have him submit a video. And part of the video that we put out is this. We, the Atlantic Council, stand with Ukraine's heroes, mothers and sons, fathers and daughters, young and old, living and lost, today and in the days to come. Along with the rest of the world, we join in your proud refrain, Slava Ukraina, heroes Slava. Thank you.
Героям слава. Thank you, dear Melinda. Thank you for your honest and sincere answer, and thank you for the action, for the activities and support of the Atlantic Council that we admire and we do appreciate. I thank you all for participating in today's event, which was extremely important for us, for the Kyiv Security Forum, and I hope for Ukraine. Here, I would like to reiterate the message, which is the most important. Please help us rescue our brave men and women in uniform in Azovstal. and civilians who are besieged over there. This is the most important thing right now, as well as to help Ukraine get more weapons, more power, more strength to protect dangerous enemy which is conducting a genocidal war against our nation, who tries to eliminate Ukraine, who tries to destroy the free world. And we are going to fight. Ukraine will prevail. Putin will fail. I thank you for this discussion. Pray for Mariupol. Pray for our brave men and women in Azovstal. Pray for Ukraine. Stay with Ukraine. I thank you again. Дуже дякую.